So let's take a look in Isaiah at what is said about idolatry. Um, Here it talks about the guy who makes an idol. He cuts down cedars, or perhaps took a cypress or oak. He let it grow among the trees of the forest, or planted a pine, and the rain made it grow. He then cuts it down. This idolater. This wood is used as fuel for burning. Some of it he takes and warms himself. He kindles a fire and bakes bread. It's wood. He's burning it. It's useful. But he also fashions a god and worships it. From the wood he has just cut down. He makes an idol and bows down to it. Half of the wood he burns in the fire. Over it he prepares his meal. He roasts his meat and eats his fill. He also warms himself and says, "Ah, I am warm. I see the fire." But from the rest, he makes a god, his idol. He bows down to it and worships. He prays to it and says, "Save me. You are my God." This block of wood. They know nothing. Now, is he talking about the idols, or is he talking about the idolaters? Is he talking about the carved images, or is he talking about the people who carved them? They know nothing. They understand nothing. Their eyes are plastered over so they cannot see, and their minds closed so they cannot understand. Well, it could be either. The idolater becomes like the idol. The person who worships a false god becomes like the false god. If you worship a dumb block of wood, you will become like a dumb block of wood with your eyes plastered over so you cannot see and your minds closed so you cannot understand. No one stops to think. No one has the knowledge or understanding to say, "Wait a minute. Half of it I used for fuel. I even baked bread over its coals. I roasted meat and I ate. Shall I make a detestable thing from what is left? Shall I bow down to a block of wood?" Such a person feeds on ashes. A deluded heart misleads him. He cannot himself save himself or say, "Is not this thing in my right hand a lie?" Is not this thing in my right hand a lie? This is a little peg doll made by one of my students of St. Genesius. My students sometimes send me things. I had a student send me several boxes of pasta and spaghetti sauce and pizza sauce once. So I like gifts from students. Let's suppose, though, I had made this and I took the time to carve it and paint it. And then I say, "Behold, peg doll, you are my God." Well, don't I know that it's false? I think in one way we do. Now, first of all, understand something. The first commandment is, "I am the Lord thy God. You shall have no other gods before me." The first commandment tells us not to commit idolatry, to worship false gods, particularly these gods that are of our own making. Don't we understand that we've created this? We become dumb and blind and deaf like a block of wood when we worship a block of wood. But why do we do this? I think on the one hand, every human being has a desire to love God, an inner prompting or an outer pull that draws us to the Spirit. And it's sort of like any other desire we have for food or sex or companionship. We have to put in some work to make sure that these desires actually reach their intended objects and that they don't simply dissipate, and that we don't waste ourselves in following them down the wrong path. The same is true for our desire to worship. It's built into our hearts. But if we worship a false god, it's easy because a block of wood won't make any demands from you. A block of wood won't tell you to be honest. It won't tell you to be true to your wife or husband. It won't tell you, "Don't get mad. Don't kill. Don't be envious." It won't make these demands upon you. And yet we are idolaters. Perhaps we worship rubber chickens. This is what I worship. As a matter of fact, I worship rubber chickens so much that, look, I have many of them. But the thing is, today we mostly see it either in people who are so greedy that they worship making money, or they're so into just the pleasures of the flesh, that they worship the pleasures of the flesh. But we really see it in the Catholic Church for people who become ideologues or who have ideologies. They come up with something that's related to politics in the world, and that becomes their God. They're not going to love their enemies. They're not going to do what Jesus said. They're not going to try to live a loving life. They're not even really going to try to find out more about God, although they may congratulate themselves for being very devout and praying novenas and so forth. What they will ultimately do, and we all have this temptation, what they will ultimately do is worship something of their own making, a false God, perhaps even a politician whom they see as a savior. And they worship this politician or this political party or this idea rather than worshiping the truth. That's idolatry. We don't make little wooden statues anymore and worship them the way people did in Isaiah's day. But what we do is we worship false creations of our own, and we tell ourselves and one another that they're more important than anything else, that those are our gods. There are many passages like this in the Old Testament about idolatry, but I think they're fascinating because they really are about the psychology of what happens when we worship something of our own creation and something that's false. But I got to go because the bat signal is shining. So since I'm chicken man, I've got to take my rubber chicken superpower weapons and I've got to use them to fight the forces of evil because teaching is just like one of the thousand things I do, but don't tell anybody.